Everybody, welcome to Simon Chardiet's New York Stories. Fix his camera a little bit and leave some comments on the chat if you want. I don't really announce these things in advance, I just kind of do them. So that's the story, man. I just kind of do them. And as always, any tips that it says here, virtual tips at PayPal, any tips go into the recording fund to make the next two records, and that's going to be a couple of they're like a couple of big singles, like three songs. One is going to be Simon and JJ. It's going to be the rockabilly stuff, and the other is going to be Ball Breaking Pricks, which is going to be punk rock stuff. So anyway, man, that's the story. So I was listening to Johnny Powers, the rockabilly guy, today, and he was on Fortune Records. And Fortune put out a lot of different stuff. They put out a lot of great. They were based out of Detroit. Johnny Powers was a Detroit guy, and they put out a lot of different stuff: gospel, blues, rockabilly, doo-wop, soul music. They put out like country and western records. They put out like under-the-counter dirty records too that were like you couldn't buy them. They were all full of curse words and shit. You had to buy them under the counter. So they were Detroit, so it got me to thinking about Andre Williams, maybe like, one of the heavies at Fortune Records. And I'm very proud to say I played with him. And I played with him back in the 90s. The 90s was a very busy and productive time for me. I'd gotten clean, and I was trying to like catch up again. We'll get more in that later, but I was trying to catch up and make up for lost time. I had a few years where I was kind of, you know, bottomed out or whatever, or trying to get back on my feet. So Pete called me to play with Andre, and he'd played once before, and this was like, there was in the late 90s, there was this whole like swing fad. I wouldn't even say jazz. It was like kind of a lot of bands trying to do Louis Jordan or Louis Primo, Sam Putera, that stuff. It wasn't like they would do a swing like, they were not like that kind of swing, but they were doing more like, they trying to be I don't know, maybe a little Louis Jordan, but they weren't even. I called it the Great Swing Scare in 1998. I cashed in on it too because I did some gigs like that. But I guess the Swing Scare in '98 was a step in the right direction, but I don't know. So anyway, they had some swing band back in Andre, and I guess they were okay. But Pete called me and he wanted me to play. I was like, fucking hell yeah. I knew Andre Williams from Johnny D that was in Joey Miserable and the Worms for a while. Gave me a cassette, and it had Jailbait. It had Jailbait by Andre Williams. Not Jailbait by Motorhead, but the Andre Williams one where it's more like a cautionary tale of what's going to happen to you. Let's leave it like that. So I was like, yeah, Andre Williams is the man. So he called me on this gig, and what Andre was a very innovative guy because he mixed. He wasn't the most virtuosic singer, but he was a great conceptual artist. Like you would call it high concept art. He was very, very witty and very sly and very subversive in like a kind of like anti-authority way, like almost pre-punk rock or something. And he mixed church music, like, sanctified church music, really, really greasy street corner, low down doo-wop, really greasy blues, and a lot of Latin rhythms. If you listen to a lot of his stuff, it's got mambos and cha-cha-chas on it and stuff. A lot of his stuff. So, and he had the great Johnny Bassett on guitar. So Pete put this band together, and it was Willie Martinez on drums, and I believe the bass player was the Preacher, the same guy that played with had played with Big Joe Turner, uh, and then I played guitar. Bill Sims Jr. played guitar, and it was great because we walked into rehearsal and we both had the same guitar, so we bonded over that. And then I know that Raven was playing sax on some of it, and we had a trumpet player, and we had these 5 young guys, about 19 years old, from Brooklyn, that were a doo-wop group, and they were the $5. Like, so we had this whole big ass band, right? And Pete's goal with this was to replicate all the old Fortune records as close as possible, and I really worked on it too. So, we got together. Andre came in, he was great. uh and the first place we played was Chicago Blues. We had some rehearsals, and we did all that old Andre stuff: Bacon Fat, Just Because, Pulling Time, Jailbait, Is It True, uh Andre Williams Is Moving, all that stuff. Go check it out. And so we had the singers, and they were duplicating all the doo-wop parts. It was just fantastic. Remember, Andre was staying with Bill and Miriam, right, from the A-Bones, and apparently he did the John Gonzalez thing, and he snorted like Andre was like the age I am now, but he was still at it, man. He was at it. So he kept getting these advances from Pete, and the advances would just go up his nose or whatever. So the show came. It was fantastic. It's one of my greatest memories of rock and roll, was playing with Andre. He came out, and he had 3 suits, I remember. A fire engine red suit with everything matching: the socks, the shirt, the tie, white suit, and he had some other kind of suit. I wouldn't remember it so well, but I think it was a pinstripe. So he had like 3 suits, and we would play a song, and he'd come back out in a different suit. Like, he did that like 3 times a night, and we would play for hours. He had so much energy, and he was telling all these funny stories in between. And and he wasn't the most. This is like, I got to get into some like non politically correct stuff, like Andre's behavior and everything. It wasn't the most politically correct stuff. He was kind of like half a pimp. Like, we got this guy in the neighborhood, Joey, half a gangster, and then Andre was kind of like half a pimp, so he was always like chewing some kind of fucking angle. But we played the show, like rave reviews, everything. Uh, but I saw these 2 guys, and I knew them from Tramps, from playing Tramps and from hanging out there, going to shows, like. And I was like, I saw these guys, and they're like, "Hey, Joey Miserable," and I was immediately like, "Oh my God, I just don't want to talk to him." They're just like real fucking kind of like coke scum guys, you know? You know what I mean? I'm gonna get cancel cultured by coke addicts. They're gonna be like, "You triggered me when you shamed me for being a cokehead." I don't know, but they were real coke scum. So after the show, they latched on to Andre, and they got into card game with him, and they took him for everything. Pete had to go into his pocket to pay the band because all the gig money from playing Chicago blues had already gone up Andre's nose. So Pete had lost his shirt. He paid us all. He's a very honorable guy. But Andre got into this card game, and in the card game, he lost all 3 suits, his watch, his shoes, like everything, right? His hats, his watch, his gold chains, his jewelry, and his bus ticket back to Detroit. And I think they literally, when they had taken him for everything that he owned and possessed, they just split. So like Andre, this story was related to me by the late great Bill Miller and by Miriam Lina, who's still very much with us, thank God. But Bill and Miriam got awakened at like 8:30 or 9 in the morning by Andre, and he hopped the subway to go to their house, and he was like in his underwear or something. He had like no clothes on. It was the summer, luckily, but he was in his underwear, or they might have given him like a pair of sweatpants or something, but he was like basically in his underwear, and he had nothing. So he had to, then like somebody had to spot him, like, a tracksuit and a pair of sneakers and a bus ticket back to Detroit. But I kept working with him, man. We played like everywhere we play. I'll probably forget some of the things we did, but we played a bunch of shows. We came back to Chicago blues, and this time Andre didn't get no card game. Things went a little smoother, and then we did a lot of rehearsing, right? And the rehearsals could be like, a lot of rehearsals are somewhat chaotic or shambolic. But now, this next story, okay, is, I'm not going to be politically correct here, okay? But I want you guys to know where I'm coming from, okay? I am a New York Jew, like far left, liberal, anarchist, whatever. But my mom is Jewish, okay? I'm half Latino, and I have worked my whole life with African American musicians. So I want you to know where I'm coming from in the next story, because it's not political correctness, okay? For at least not for like Stalin or Khrushchev or whatever, So, and anyhow, so what we got here is we got rehearsal. Now Andre was always, chewing some kind of fucking angle. So he met this very nice lady she was from Jamaica. She was an Afro-Jamaican lady, but in Jamaica, there are a certain amount of black people that are Jewish, okay? I know because I had one of my bike messenger dispatchers, my favorite dispatcher ever, Fat Dominic, was a black Jew. So I know in Jamaica they have a lot of black Jews, right? So, and in parts of Africa too. So this lady was black and Jewish, and she was an attorney, and she was probably a fairly well-off and solvent person. So Andre was like, Andre, who would hit on every woman in the joint, but he was homing in on her because he saw, like, she's probably got a nice house, a nice car. He can, you know, have a comfortable existence. He was going to try to, like, get in with her, And so he was pursuing her, and she was a very, very nice looking, presentable lady, probably around Andre's age, around the age I am now. She's very nice. I talked to her a couple of times. Anyway, so Andre was really, like sweating her. So he's late to rehearsal, and Pete's there, and we're like all rehearsing without him, and he comes out. Bill Miller gave, I know, no, it was Bill Peich gave him a ride in a car. It's when Bill was still alive, thank God. So Bill Peich pulls up in his car, and Andre gets out, and he's doubled over in pain like this, like this. Now, what it was that he asked this lady to marry him, and she said she couldn't marry him unless he was circumcised, right? So he went and got the entire bar mitzvah, and he went to a moil, a ritual circumcision, and he underwent this shit at like the age of 62. He's double over in agonizing pain. I'm like, Andre, are you right? What's the matter? What's the matter? You want us to call an ambulance? Are you right? He goes, it burns. It burns. I was like, what's up, Andre? They cut it. They cut it. What happened? Did you get no? I got circumscribed. They circumscribed me. I said, what? You had a bris? You went by a moil? They the lady said she wouldn't marry me unless they cut it. I got circumscribed. I was like, Andre. And he said, they're converted. They said some things. Now I'm Jewish. I was like, I came up to Andre. I didn't want to, I wanted to give him a hug, but he was in a lot of pain. I was like, Andre, I'm sorry it hurts. Listen, I just got to say this, not for nothing, Andre. Remember, I'm the only white person in the room. Everybody else is African. Like 15 people are African descent, one Puerto Rican, and me. Okay, so I'm like, Andre, welcome to the tribe. I got to tell you something, okay? I'm Jewish. Now, there's a lot of people that don't like black people. We all know about them assholes. A lot of people, for some reason, don't like black people. But everybody hates us Jews. Congratulations. You just went from the frying pan into the fire. You just went from chitlins to challah. You just went from Alabama to Auschwitz, I said to Andre. And everybody in the room started cracking up, rolling around on the floor. They were like, fucking, and I was like, that's the truth, that Andre converted to Judaism. So I did break his balls a little bit, but and then we did some shows, and then guess who we run off with after the show? We did a couple of more shows. We did Under Acme with Bill Sims Jr. It was great, right? And then he starts playing with John Spencer Blues Explosion, right? So I wasn't playing with him no more, but that's my Andre stories, And then I was so happy when he stopped drinking, And he always told me that he wrote Mustang Sally, and he wrote it, and that he sold it to Wilson Pickett for an 8-ball of coke. So that's the other story that he told me. So this all happens 1997, 1998. At the same time, I was playing with Rancid. I went out to California to play with some of the guys from Rancid and some of the guys from the Slackers in this band, the Silencers. But it all kind of fell apart. But it's around that same time. So that's my New York story for today. Was Andre Williams. If you know him, listen to him again. If you don't know him, go on fucking YouTube and listen to his Fortune records, his old shit from the 50s, and you will be very, very happy. All right. Mwah. And I'm sorry, I know I'm not politically correct, but if I gotta say this, if anybody tonight here has been offended by anything that I said or done in my attempts to entertain you, I gotta tell you from the bottom of my heart that I don't give a shit. Mwah.